Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French and thank you for spending part of your Friday evening with us. And we're going to be spending pretty much the majority of the next hour focusing not just on COVID, but the impacts that it is causing, particularly to America's pocketbook. Now, the need for relief from Washington we'll delve into as well, even the impact it's having on mental health of our kids. But we wanted to begin by drawing the picture of just how deadly the pandemic is getting and how quickly it is spreading. Normally, we'd pull out maps and charts and graphs to do that, but not today. Today, you can see this for yourself. First, the severity of the current wave. Here, the CDC director, Robert Redfield.
Probably for the next 60 to 90 days, we're going to have more deaths per day than we had in 9/11 or we had in Pearl Harbor. I mean, this is really, as I said, this is a real, going to be a real unfortunate loss of life. It's also very sobering to realize that in the United States today, that COVID-19 now is the leading cause of death, surpassing heart disease and other causes of death.
You can also see the spread hitting home. That's wherever you're watching us tonight. And you don't have to look past the headlines. New York City ending all indoor dining again starting Monday. Indoor dining also being cut in several Maryland counties, while the governor of Virginia, he's imposed a curfew. Dallas, new occupancy restrictions for all businesses despite a lack of help coming from Austin. Pennsylvania has taken the extraordinary step of closing every casino in the state from tomorrow into the new year. And some 85% of California residents, including in San Francisco and Los Angeles, under strict stay-at-home orders. And all those health concerns and restrictions, they're taking a huge bite out of our economy. Tens of thousands of businesses, as you know, they've shuttered or closed altogether for good. Hiring, it is slow. More and more people seeking unemployment assistance and others looking for help. Here's how bad the COVID economy has gotten. This graph, it compares job losses from the Great Recession to today. See the red line where we are with today's job losses? There are still more people out of work right now than at the peak of the Great Recession, for a frame of reference. And the human toll of that wrapped up in one headline. People now hurting so badly, we are seeing spikes when it comes to shoplifting for food. More and more people stealing things like medicine, food, because they can't afford to buy the basic necessities. And despite all that pain and suffering and your constant calls for long overdue action, Congress, they haven't passed any COVID relief for the American public since March. That's shameful. 9 months have gone by. The House, they passed multiple bills since then, but they die on the floor of the Senate because Senate Republicans keep rejecting them. Even now, as we lose 3,000 Americans every day, still no deal. And by the way, come the day after Christmas, more than 10 million Americans could be looking at eviction, but again, D.C. cannot get their act together. And without that federal help, a slew of critical services could soon be slashed in every state in our union. And I'll focus on that with Andrew in our next segment. But now, I want to take a wider view of our economy, the hit it has taken from COVID, and what will happen without help from D.C. And for that, I can't think of a better person to talk to than our next guest, Mark Zandi. Mark, chief economist of Moody's Analytics. He's considered among the most respected economists in our country. And Mark, as we sit and watch Washington dither right now, even if they come up with a fractional piece, isn't that missing the larger picture? They are the place of last resort, and only the federal government can put money into this economy of the scope that's needed to at least accelerate a recovery. Otherwise, you know, yes, a little is better than nothing, but it's not nearly going to do the trick to get us back on our feet.
Yeah, I think that's right, Richard. The economy is struggling. The pandemic is raging. Infections, hospitalization, deaths are all rising, and that is doing damage. You can see it in the job market. You saw initial claims for unemployment insurance rose very sharply last week. They're obviously very, very high, and they rose again. The employment growth in November slowed very sharply. Yeah, so I think recession risks are high, and I do think if lawmakers can't get it together and pass a substantive fiscal relief package, the odds that the economy will go back into recession in the next few months are uncomfortably high. So yeah, I think they need to step up and put forward a package here very quickly.
You know, I know the CARES Act wasn't perfect. I know that there was some abuse and some fraud. But overall, in the bigger scheme of things, it accomplished what it intended to do, didn't it?
Actually, very successful. It was large, depending on how you do the accounting, $2.2 trillion. So that's 11, 12% of the nation's GDP. That's a big package. Helped small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program, help unemployed workers from supplemental unemployment insurance. Long list of help for PPE and testing, tracing, airlines. Stimulus checks, of course, were part of that as well. That was very large, very helpful. And if we hadn't gotten that help, obviously the recession would have been much deeper, much longer, and the problems we face now even more severe. So yeah, that was a slam dunk success.
So to that end, Mark, I'm really confused, and I'm not a babe in the woods in terms of being cynical with Washington, but I don't get the opposition, particularly because the Republican Party, prior to COVID, didn't show any overt concern regarding deficits or debt. We were trending to a $1 trillion deficit before we even heard of this pandemic. We know the people that would be getting the aid will put it right back in the economy out of necessity. We also know the pandemic's playing no favorites. Blue and red states alike, they're going to have to take an axe to their budgets. To that end, I don't understand the opposition, because there will be blame, since at the end of this year, people are going to start getting eviction notices again. So the optics are going to be terrible. Why would any political party want to own that?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I've been asking myself that a lot. I thought before the election we'd get another fiscal relief package. It makes good economic sense, as you eloquently argue, but I thought it made good political sense. So I was wrong, and here we are. And again, I think support is absolutely the right thing to do from an economic perspective. But the politics are difficult. They're a bit vexed, and hopefully lawmakers can get it together and sign on the dotted line here relatively soon, because if they don't, you're right. It's going to be a very, very weak economy, and I think lawmakers will get blamed for that. So, yeah, I'm confused by it as well.
Are there sectors or industries that can't make it another 3 or 6 months without aid, Mark? Are you looking, whether it be, we saw some daunting numbers in New York on both the restaurant side and hospitality. We already know on travel, et cetera. They're barely hanging on. Months will literally decide whether they survive or not.
Yeah, particularly the smaller businesses, right? They obviously have been just hanging on here up till now. And given that the pandemic is to a degree that local officials have no choice but to ask these businesses to pull back again. I live here in Philadelphia, and the city stopped indoor dining a couple of weeks ago, and the state of Pennsylvania just announced even more restrictions. So larger companies, they'll navigate through. They have the resources, they have the savings. They can get credit from the bank. But smaller companies can't. And, if lawmakers don't pass more help and there isn't another round of Paycheck Protection Program money for smaller businesses, many will fail. And they're in the industries you mentioned, obviously the restaurants, in the accommodation, leisure, travel industries. The airlines obviously are struggling here. Gyms, recreational activities, those businesses will, in many cases, fail. So, yeah, it's going to leave much deeper scars in the economy, because they're not going to get help, and I don't think they'll make it to the other side of this pandemic. And the real tragedy here is we can see the vaccines are coming. We know this is going to come to an end in the spring, summer, hopefully. So all we have to do is help these folks out to get from here to there, and I think we'll be in a much better spot on the other side. So again, hopefully that logic will win the day soon.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the time. Now, one more note on the congressional Republicans' refusal to do a COVID relief bill. Here's a question. If they hadn't been working to help rescue Americans from financial ruin, again in red and blue states here, what have they been focusing on? Well, in the Senate, Mitch McConnell has kept on confirming more Trump judges, even though longstanding tradition says that should stop during a lame duck period. With now over 120 some odd Republicans in the House, that's the majority of them there, I should mention. What have they been doing? Well, they found time to sign on to thoroughly what can only be described as an un-American, undemocratic lawsuit coming out of Texas looking to overturn the results of the 2020 election. They can't find the time or the political courage or decency to help you and your loved ones, but they're doing this. I want to show you their names so you can see if your representative is among these cowards. These are members, a plurality of the Republican Party, my God, who stand ready and willing to help Trump trash the rule of law and the will of the people. That is, they prioritize the demands of a crybaby in chief over real needs of Americans. Now, I want to compare that number to the number of Republicans who have actually been getting in front of cameras or signing letters demanding COVID relief for the American people. We would, but I can't give you a single face. Look, politics, it is a team sport. I get it. But what we're seeing now, I have never in my life seen before. Yes, there's been a fringe wacko here or there, but a plurality of one of the two political parties in this country? Really? These Republicans not only putting party above country, but for Donald Trump's ego, while Americans, literally the day after Christmas, are looking 10 million of them plus at possible evictions? Really? Is that what the GOP of 2020 has come to? My God, they should be ashamed of themselves, and their constituents should be outraged. If Americans can't count on one of our two major parties, the Republican Party, during a time of national crisis, when can we count on them? They were elected to serve the people, we the people, not the president. We get to vote and decide who our president is, not one person who throws a tantrum who says, heads I win, tails you lose. Now, we are paying for the mistakes here of that party, and too often, Americans are paying with their lives. All right, coming up next, as we've shown, relief from Washington desperately needed to boost this economy, or at least to stop it from cratering. We can do it if they just act. But there's another fiscal time bomb out there. The virus is threatening to detonate. I'm talking about state services, the stuff we all need and take for granted. Hospitals, schools, first responders, transit systems, all of them could be on the chopping block without state aid. We're going to show you how this could impact this country and how could it impact you and your loved ones next.